All Marketers Are Liars by Seth Godin. Known for his modern marketing and business classic Purple Cow, this author has a way of thinking like nothing I've ever seen. Seth Godin believes strongly in a world where people only do work that matters to them. Modern education is an outdated product of the industrial age that needs an uncanny amount of reform. Customers should be cared for to the utmost degree. Small is the new big, and much, much more. He has a very spacey perspective, and I can't emphasize how distinct it is. I checked out other books of his like Song of Significance, The Practice, and Linchpin, but they just don't hit the same way that Purple Cow does. So this one is still really popular though. And what's the story behind All Marketers Are Liars? Are all marketers really liars? Like, well, why is he calling them liars? It sounds like a bad thing, but this dude is a marketing whiz. So what the heck? What are they lying about? What do they have to hide? What's the truth? Let's talk about it. Just a little overview, by the way, of what you'll see in the description. There are affiliate links, and if you buy anything through those links, like maybe this book, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel to keep making these videos. You can also find this book and many others on my Amazon storefront, but any books that I mention in this video, chances are I've also reviewed them, and I'll drop links to those reviews in the descriptions too. So affiliate links, Amazon storefront, and other reviews. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. So let's start with highlights. He said that either you tell stories that spread or you become irrelevant. So much of this book I was expecting at this point to be about just stories. As Brene Brown says, stories are data with a soul. So he gives example after example of how people use stories to help them sell. And this series of examples is something that really makes Godin shine, but he's telling us a different story than that of stories being data with a soul. It's kind of like when people say the story you tell yourself. It's whatever situation or ideal you conjure up to believe as being the case, which is what marketers do in order to get a point across or intentionally guide our thought processes toward that point. Watch 5 commercials in a row. There's not a lot of logic involved in them. It's really just dramatization and enthusiasm. Next is Gaunt marketing. He said marketing is about spreading ideas, and it's no longer about an old lady yelling, "Where's the beef?" Marketing used to be so much about just hype, but he went on in this about like the golden age of television, something he's very interested in because I think it helped shape what advertising is now, and what advertising is now, it is really not much like it at all, but it's such a building block, or maybe a stepping stone. He also emphasized how this new marketing will separate winners from losers, in that winners will actually figure out what works. And then he went into these steps. I don't know what they're steps for. I don't think he made it clear throughout the steps, but the step 1 is their worldview and frames got there before you did. Here we learn that the great flaw in marketing theory is its inability to explain variety. We don't all want the same things. We all have different biases, values, and assumptions, and those are shaped by our parents, schools, experiences, friends, and more. During a presidential election, could 165 million people be wrong? Could they just be wrong? Michelle Obama said that it's not a war of political parties, it's a war of belief systems. And it makes sense. What shapes these belief systems? Stories. A vote is a statement about the voter, not the candidate. These worldviews are shaped well before the elections, and once you realize the importance of the vernacular people use in that, you can identify their worldview easier. That's what he says. Step 2, people only notice the new and then make a guess. There was once a 10-year-old grilled cheese that sold on eBay for $28,000 because it had what looked like the face of Virgin Mary grilled onto it. Really think about that. A 10-year-old grilled cheese that sold on eBay for $28,000 because it had what looked like the face of Virgin Mary grilled onto it. I swear our brains are so restless, we'll find stuff to believe and put a value on. If that really happened, all religious beliefs aside, let's be real here. Grilled cheese, it could have been anything. Why wouldn't it be something a little bit more like universally symbolic, like leaves from a tree or lines in sand? He said that in the face of random behavior, people become their own lies, which is crazy. It is literally crazy. Step 3 is First impressions start the story. I don't think the average consumer is as rational as we're made to believe. And the reason why is that we as consumers don't get the chance to be as rational as we want. Millions of people purchase books every year without knowing what's inside. In fact, the only way to know for sure that people like a book is to read that book, at which point it's unnecessary to actually buy a copy. For the most part, we rely on reviews and casual testers to help us make decisions. So we rely on our intuitions and heavily on others in order to do this. And again, it all just comes back to the stories we tell ourselves and each other about how things are going to turn out in the end. Step 4, lastly, is great marketers tell stories we believe. You do actually have to sell the story though. The person who ends up becoming president, they sell their story the best. Forget for a second who's likely to be a better candidate. Who's more likely to win? Because even if the better candidate wins, they're not the same thing. And if you don't believe me, ask every American who's regretted a voting choice over the years. The most unquestionable example of a bad president who people just voted for based on snap judgment was Warren G. Harding. But I tell the story of that and in my review of Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And in Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell tells the story probably better than anyone else could have. Malcolm Gladwell's an iconic storyteller. The next chapter is examples. This was just further examples of different scenarios in which the information and knowledge in this book was applied very accurately. Here, this is a good example of one of these examples. Is buying organic food a cost-effective way to support family farmers who respect the land? Not unless you buy it from a food stand. Buy it from a farmer's market, and most of the money goes to marketers and processors, not the folks who work so hard to grow the food. Then you have important aside. This was like an example of how this whole spacey nature works of his writing and thinking. The psychic impact of a nasty flight attendant is more important than a plane arriving 10 minutes early to its destination. The enthusiasm a company's staff has when they install new robots on the factory floor can be just as important as the work those robots actually do. Basically, irrational beliefs aren't a distraction. They are an intrinsic part of the quality of a product. But this chapter talked particularly about using lying for good instead of bad. It was probably my favorite chapter of the book. But the example he gave about Coke products and corn syrup, it reminded me of Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. Like when you make a terrible problem out of nothing and you refuse to take responsibility for it, by the way. Like this is what people want. It's not our fault that people buy it. We're not putting a gun to their heads. Disgusting. Step 5, apparently there was a step 5, marketers with authenticity thrive. This was about how to make sure your story is being told authentically. My favorite thing about this book is probably my favorite thing about a lot of marketing books, and that's a healthy variety of different examples. It can get a little meta at some points. I mean, there was even a point where he explained why the book is called All Marketers Are Liars instead of All Marketers Are Storytellers. The next chapter is Competing in the Lying World. This talked about ways to completely cut through the noise with your story. I think a good sign that companies in an industry are doing this is when you see salespeople or influencers of any kind saying that, there are multiple different competitors, but they all separate themselves in distinct ways. And it's up to you which way matters the most, because that is what's going to help you as an individual of a demographic decide that is the right choice for you, in that they're all very different and they're doing what they should. It's a bit more granular than that, but aside from affordability, options really do come down heavily to what stories are told. Next you have Remarkable, the Cow Has Not Left the Building. I don't know if this is my favorite chapter, but it was definitely my favorite chapter name. The key element to a story's effectiveness is how remarkable it is. Here he touched upon Purple Cow, referencing how it affects a company or product's story, and this involves stretching the lengths of something to the very furthest that they can be stretched in order to make that story worth telling. Then you have bonus part 1. My favorite example of this chapter was Blue Nile, the jewelry store. They are really giving Tiffany a run for their money in terms of value. You get a fantastic quality product, but for nothing close to the price. It's not like, a $5 for an engagement ring or close to it, but it's much less than on average than Tiffany. Blue Nile has a way. Blue Nile, what I think they have to do, I haven't bought from them before. I have bought from Tiffany, but what I think Blue Nile needs to do, based on what I know, is they have to find a way to sweeten their brand. Tiffany has their own shade of blue. Like, what the hell? People make car interiors. I've seen this on TikTok in that color, and they literally call it Tiffany blue. It's actually pretty sick in the right vehicle. But that blue is something people really look forward to seeing in that bag, and the bag has a box, and it's all in the same exact shade of blue. Blue Nile needs to find a way to separate themselves kind of like that, and in a way that people see it and they immediately think of Blue Nile. The Blue Nile CEO wants to be the Tiffany of the next generation. The year before this book, Blue Nile outsold Tiffany in engagement rings. If that doesn't say anything about how well they're doing, I don't know what does. Bonus part 2, an elephant in the room that I'd like to address here, is the title of the book. I recognize it may sound a little polarizing because it really sounds like, or is, a bold statement about marketers, and he's not even acknowledging it as a generalization. He's just like, all marketers are liars, with no exceptions whatsoever. And by the end of the book, I really began to get the sense that what he's trying to tell us is that this is natural. It is the way of the game, per se, and it is not exactly a bad thing because it's what causes markets to move. Almost halfway into the important aside chapter, this became very, very evident to me. And then lastly is good stuff to read. This chapter is literally just other good book recommendations. Authors do this from time to time at the end of their books. A story might be true, but it can cause us to believe that things aren't always entirely true, which can be harmful, but this is a problem or dilemma, for lack of a better word. I don't think there's a way around. For all those app developers out there and all of that, I don't think there's a way to invent a way around it, but I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Seriously. This was a very fun book and an easy read. There were some chaotic twists and turns, but I think Godin knows how to deliver those without totally overwhelming the reader. The one thing he did where he mentioned the ghostwriting, that was honestly kind of screwed up, but I got over it pretty quickly. If the book weren't so damn good, I don't think I would. Overall, it painted itself as, I don't know how much of a reach this is, but it painted itself as like a distinct, modernized extension of positioning, which I think, given the importance of positioning, one of the most influential marketing books in the last maybe century, came out in the early 80s, I think the world could definitely use it. Quotes, "A fraud is marketing with side effects. It's almost impossible to keep a tangled story straight. Brands get rich, cut corners, and get hammered. If I knew what you knew, would I buy what you sell? If you can build your entire organization around delivering a particular story, you've dramatically increased the chances that this story will actually get told. If the employees aren't having a good time, why should the customers?" Direction 1. I recommend this book to anyone who wonders how it is that people buy products and sometimes regret it and other times don't. Direction 2. If you like this book, I recommend checking out Purple Cow, also by Seth Godin, and Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk. I will never stop pushing that book. It is my favorite Gary Vaynerchuk book. All Marketers Are Liars by Seth Godin. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video, if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I'll see you then.